Welcome back to another episode of Dentistry's Growing with Grace podcast. Join Grace and her guest of the week as they discuss lessons learned in the industry and explore unique insights into ethical growth.
Good morning, Grace. How are you?
Hi, Kevin. I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm great. So for those of you who don't know, this is Grace Rizza of Identity Dental Marketing. And my name, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kevin Johnson, and I am the CEO of Leverage Consulting. And between the pair of us, Grace and I have a common client. And after a few conversations, she and I had this brainchild that some of the things that we were talking about, others might be interested in listening to it or benefiting from it. So we just would really wanted to get on here in free form, talk a little bit about how do we fill chairs in today's environment. And of course, part of the reason for having Grace here is to talk about how do we drive that traffic to the door, and how do we fill chairs with things that we do outside of our practice. And a lot of what I will probably talk about, we'll find out, is that maybe it's what do we do with them once they hit that front door. So sound like a winner, Grace?
It sounds great. Yeah. And I'm really excited to kind of talk through some of the things that people don't openly share. Some of the things that you'll hear people talking about things on a podcast and they're just trying to sell you something. But we really need this information to help grow your practices. So we're gonna share openly and in a way where you can start applying things right away.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up the topic about what people don't openly share, because some of it, I guess there's multiple avenues of that, because with the non-sharing part, there's a lot of people, for example, those of you who might be listening to this, you go to a national meeting, and I think on one hand, Grace is saying you'll be quote unquote sold things maybe, okay, and it sounds good, but then there's also other aspects of what people don't talk about, which I think we're also going to touch on, which are the I'm not going to call them the dirty secrets or what have you, but there are a lot of things that really go on in most practices that people don't talk about. Very common issues that you and I help practices overcome pretty much on the daily.
Absolutely. Every day, over and over again, all the time.
That's right. But we enjoy it.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I'm excited.
So that being said, I think this might be a good question just to kick this whole thing off. And maybe part of the setup for this whole thing, this is a good segue for this, is imagine someone listening to this has gone to a dental meeting, or they've been approached by someone and they say, I've literally got the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I'm going to drive hundreds of patients to your door, and you're not going to know what to do with all the patients I'm going to, and you don't have to do anything. It's easy, right? And I mean, on the management side of things, I hear stuff like this all the time. I hear people say, oh, I went to a meeting, they sold me this whole bill of goods. It sounded great, but.
Yeah.
Okay. So really what I wanted to ask you, and maybe you can help us understand, is how should they even evaluate what they're getting?
Yeah. And I've heard this being called sell the dream. Just sell them the dream. Sell them the dream. And I see it all the time. I'm doing this marketing and I don't know if it's working, or how is it working, or what am I doing? They don't really know. I think the biggest red flag or thing to consider in that environment is there a long-term commitment for the marketing? I've always had a problem with signing an annual contract for marketing or a 3-year contract. That's really common, actually, is a 3-year contract right now. It's out there. And it's just doesn't make any sense to me, because your situation can change. The goal should be to rely less on marketing and to rely more on your reputation. The marketing should just accelerate the great thing that you've already built. Unless you're starting up. If you're starting up, you definitely need to depend more on the marketing, and you need to have a fair budget, which most startups do not have a fair budget for marketing. So that's a whole podcast in and of itself. But the first thing you want to do, let's say you're in one of those situations where you went to a meeting and you bought the dream, and now you're 6 months later and you don't feel like anything has changed, but you're still writing that check every month or sending that payment every month. So the first thing to do is evaluate. Evaluate the original goals of each marketing strategy. So sometimes people go into marketing and they purchase it just because it sounds good. Or, I see this a lot with social media right now. And Kevin, maybe you see this too. I want to be more active on social media. And I always say to them, well, why? What is your goal of that action? And I think there's just a whole lot of pressure right now to be a social media rock star. But if that's not going to bring you new patients, what is the purpose of that activity? So every marketing initiative should be attached directly to a goal. And everything that you're doing should have a measurable result from that thing. So for instance, with social media, a lot of the organic social media is all about building your brand recognition and building your name. You want people to know who you are, know what you stand for, and come to know what to expect from you. And that's got to be true to who you are. And so you have to start, from the perspective of who am I and what am I trying to accomplish? A lot of times when I have these conversations with dentists, I start with the new patient question of how many new patients are you seeing on a monthly basis? And how many do you want to be seeing on a monthly basis? And then I help them get to that point first with the least amount of money spent or invested. Once they're there, then let's once you're comfortable, let's talk about what can you do to reinforce that brand and build that brand. So I always start with numbers. I always start with tangible goals, and then I reverse engineer that. Kevin, what do you see in this space?
Well, it kind of led me to two different things. And it's interesting because I like to get around people even outside the dental world, because, there's so many amazing things happening, whether you hang around people who do real estate, or you hang around people who build homes, or you even pay attention to Elon Musk and how he's been able to achieve so many things. It's just, we can look outside of our world and learn a lot. But one of the things I thought was funny, and I'm sure this is something that's going to make you smile and you've got some feedback on it, but they were talking about how some people really don't dedicate a certain stipend to marketing every month. So kind of like, as you were talking, I was sitting here thinking that so many people, they already have a brand. And sadly, some of them, I'm not sure they even know they have their brand, but technically they do.
You all have a brand.
But it's a lot of people, like they'll bring money in through their efforts. And sometimes they want to do more. They have that desire to do more, but they don't dedicate the resource to doing more.
Oh yeah.
So that's, as you were talking, that's kind of what I was thinking about is, we can throw money at a problem, and maybe sometimes selling the dream. That's what we get, is we throw money to somebody who sold us a really good dream. But maybe I can equate this to like going to a gym and being very purposeful, in the sense that I'm going to go and I have 7 different exercises I'm going to do in 4 different circuits. And, so I get 4 rotations, 4 sets with all 7 exercises. I'm in and out in 45 minutes. It has real purpose, as opposed to, and I'm going to ad lib, I'm talking about your world, maybe you can run with this, but it's like, rather than being noise on social media, it has purpose. And whether your objective is to get just new patients, or whether your objective is that you want to start doing full mouth rehab, or you really want to cater to a certain type of client, meaning the professional environment or something like that, that has purpose.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe just being noise on social media.
Absolutely. And this is kind of segueing into the dentist treatment plan a little bit, is once you get to the point where your new patient numbers, you're comfortable with that number of where you want it to be, and you can serve those patients, because you don't want to outgrow what you can serve, or that's a recipe for really hurting your brand in the long term.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Then it comes time to create your marketing plan. And I thought it was fun, Kevin, that you compare this to a treatment plan for the dentist. We look at what's the condition of health right now of the practice, and where do we need to be, and what's an emergency and what's an urgency and what's elective, and let's approach it that way. And so we look at, what do you currently have going on and how is it working? What's your return on investment of those marketing strategies? And from this conversation, we start to at least identify the dream. I said people are going to sell you the dream, but you really need to know what your dream is before you can go after it. You've got to have some clarity around that. So it's not just about how many more new patients can we get. And I don't know how often you hear this, Kevin, but sometimes when I ask this question, people tell me the sky's the limit. And I'm like, okay, but I do need an actual number. Like,
Well,
in 6 to 8 months, how many can you handle?
It's interesting you say that, because I've seen some in it, and I have a number in my mind that I think is a healthy number. Say if you're a general dentist and you have a reasonably full schedule, meaning, and of course, we're on the back end of all the COVID craziness, and people, we're just on the tail end of people having to shut down their practices last year. So there's still some normalization of things. But, I've worked with a guy years ago that he got 80 to 90 new patients a month. Sound good, right?
One provider, one doctor.
One doctor. Sounds crazy, right? And it sounds sexy. But I will tell you what it did to him is it turned him into a single tooth dentist. It turned him into one where he really became more like an emergency room. So there's, to your point, there's a number that we can manage. And there's a number that, for example, if you're looking at, you compare yourself to Chick-fil-A, or you want to compare yourself to Morton's Steakhouse, or whatever, really good restaurant that you like. I say Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A knows how to manage volume. I use them as an example all the time. But if you want to compare yourself to like a high-end restaurant, they don't just let it fly. There's a number they can deal with, and that's why they have a nice hostess out front that meters and manages the number of people coming through, so they can deliver a certain level of quality and service, because on the back end, that too is their marketing reputation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you said you have a number in mind. I have a number in mind. I'm curious what your number is.
So, and again, it's a,
let's see if we agree or if we disagree.
It's one of those things that you can, I'll write it down and then I'll show it real quick.
I'll write mine down too. No, this will be a fun game. No, I'm writing it.
You really want to do this?
I'm really going to write it down. And I'm going to say, okay, a general dentist who participates in only a couple plans, mostly fee for service, and well-established.
We're pretty much on the same page.
Okay.
And I will tell you, I'm doing it maybe a little bit different than you, but this will still instigate conversation.
Okay. Ready? Oh, I did a month.
I know.
Okay.
So I did mine this way because there are some practices I work with that they're 5 days a week. There was one I worked with years ago. They were 7 days a week. They were in North New Jersey, and they had Saturday and Sunday hours, because a lot of their patients lived in North Jersey, but there's no way they're coming back across the bridge for a dental appointment. So, and then you have some that they only work 2.5, 3.5 days a week. Mm-hmm. So that's why I usually stick with a daily number. But, if we work 14 days a month, or we work whatever, then we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of your number, but I'll let you.
And it's sometimes I just take the average of what I hear. So this isn't really me advising that number. I'm just letting people know that usually I hear somewhere between 15 and 35. And normally I hear 20 to 25, new patients. But it also depends on how efficient they are, if they're in network, how many days per week that they're working. And so all of those things play into it. So.
And I think that as you said earlier, to another topic, this could be a whole different podcast.
Well, yeah. And I do need to say, because if this is a podcast, they didn't see my number. So we should say it. My number was 25.
Yes.
And Kevin wrote 2 a day. So we're close. We're close.
Right. Thank you for catching that, because then we'd had a bunch of people going, I have no idea what these people are talking about.
We would have gotten some engagement though, and that would have been good for our numbers. So maybe. All right. So I like to look at their numbers. I like to look at what are you doing for marketing? What's working? If you're first on Google and you have a beautiful website, I'm not going to come in and tell you you need to redo your website and your SEO is broken. It always drives me crazy when marketing companies come in and audit things, and I get a client phone call like panicking, well, you did it wrong. I'm like, you're first on Google. I didn't do it wrong. So be logical in this evaluation, be patient in this evaluation, look at what's truly working, what's not working, and create a very concrete plan as to how you're going to get to where you need to be. So let's say you're seeing 20 new patients a month right now, and your son just graduated dental school, and now you need to see 40 new patients a month. You need to increase your new patient flow by 20 new patients per month. What is the most cost-effective way for you to get from where you are to where you want to be? And you need to know how long it's going to take to get there as well, because this isn't a magic light switch. We don't just wave our wand.
I think you and I both have learned over the years that anything worth having, you have to work for.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be hard, and it can be enjoyable.
Absolutely. I got this mental image when I was starting my business of me putting all of this energy out, calling on people and having just barely a business, just a barely budding business, and feeling so defeated. And I remember at some point realizing everything that I put out is eventually going to come back to me. Maybe not in my time, but eventually every bit of work is going to pay off. And it has. It's just not in our timeline sometimes.
So that's a point that I talk about all the time. And it was actually something that I had to come to grips with myself a while back. And it's only because I'm guessing Gary V.
I know of him. I stopped following him, but I know of him.
So, and I only bring him up because, and he's not everybody's cup of tea for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that he's always talked about is the need for just continually pumping things out into the universe. And, it's interesting, even for myself, sometimes I don't see the engagement, or sometimes I don't see things happening on my end. So if I put a post out, I might not see anything come as a result of that. But what I have learned is I'll go up and I'll go to a meeting, or I'll meet some people for dinner or something, and they'll say, I saw your podcast. I listened to and they'll mention the specifics. It's not just generalized conversation. I did one not long ago as a podcast on controlling the number one expense in your overhead. And, I did get a ton of engagement, I think, and it kind of goes back to sometimes what people don't talk about. But, I had people contact me about it. So I'm getting private messages about some of this and what have you, but you're not seeing it online. And I think sometimes as dentists or practitioners, we're used to walking into a room, most times within an hour, I'm done, I fixed it. So when we put money into something, we may not be able to see it with our eyeballs. We may not be able to put our hands around it, but it's working.
There are different marketing initiatives for different things. And there are brand building initiatives like a billboard, like organic social media. Those things are meant to enhance your recognition in your community. They're not meant to be direct new patient magnets. And so as you market, you have to know some of these things are going to have a short-term, immediate, trackable ROI. And some of these things are just going to build our reputation over time. And I think too many marketing companies get in the habit of having their salespeople, again, sell the dream. And so then people start and stop things all the time because they're like, it's not working, because they don't have fair expectations for it.
It's a consistency issue.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you have an answer to this, but pre-COVID, every statistic I saw said that the average person spent easy 5 hours a day on their phone.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about, for example, what someone might invest with you and putting your marketing dollars towards something, to me, and I'm guessing after COVID, it had to have at least increased by 50%, maybe 100% or better, that people are looking at their phone because they have more time. I mean, that's like, this is the modern billboard.
Yes, yes. Facebook and Instagram are the new billboard in terms of branding and building your brand. SEO is the new phone book. Video marketing is the new TV and radio ad. So yeah, it's time to just evolve what you've done. The hard part for dentists is that it's intangible for them. If they send out a mailer, they could go knock on their neighbor's door and make sure they got their mailer, and they can trust that that thing happened. And the hard part about digital marketing is you can't touch it. You can't smell it. You can't rip it in half. But you can, and you can learn to see, and you can learn to read your analytics, and you can learn to understand what you're investing in, and you should, because too many marketing companies right now are getting away with stealing from people. They are selling big, pay us $3,000 a month and we'll market for you. Well, this covers your Google ads, your Facebook ads. And then the dentists aren't getting anything out of it. And they're like, well, why not? I'm spending all this money. I guess it just doesn't work. And the hard thing for me is when they just give up on the things that do work because the marketing company was pocketing the ad spend. And I'm seeing it left and right. Yes. So to protect yourself from this, you need to pay Google directly. You need to pay Facebook directly. Your marketing company can help you set it up properly, but you need to demand transparency in your marketing budget and how it's utilized, because you get ripped off one time. And if you don't understand how you got ripped off, you could give up on the thing that could be your absolute best investment because you just didn't have the right person helping you.
And that gets to a level of trust.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, it would be a sad day, but that gets to a level of trust that one would hope that if you're giving somebody $3,000 a month, that that it's going for the right things and being spent well. But I think in today's world, the key word that you just said is transparency.
Yeah. I mean, read the contract carefully. They're usually written to defend the marketing company. Don't sign up for an annual or 3-year thing. Why should you? If they set realistic expectations for you, if they're available to you, and if they're doing what they say they're going to do, then you're not going to leave anyways. Right. If their business is dependent on locking you in, it's a big red flag. So be careful before you buy the dream that you've got some sort of accountability in place.
So what you're saying is identity dental marketing tries to work just like dentists do, that we create such an experience you never want to leave.
I have to, or I have no business. Yes, I have to. My whole team has to. We have no contracts with anybody. So yes. And I want to just touch on one thing before we kind of flip the script. And I want to grill you a little bit, Kevin, and kind of understand some of the things that you do for doctors as well, and how you can give them some things to take away today. I have these meetings, these treatment planning sessions with doctors about 5 times a day. And I always start with, how many new patients are you seeing on a monthly basis? And how many do you want to be seeing? And what kind of patients do you want to be seeing? And what are you doing for marketing currently? And 95% of the time, they don't actually know the answer to those questions. It is, I think we see about, and then there's a long pause, and they're not doing math. They're guessing. They're trying to look back for the past week. And so make sure when your new patients are calling you that your front office team is documenting the referral source for every new patient, because a marketing company can slap their phone number all over the internet to take credit for every single patient call that's not even a new patient. And they can, in their meeting with you, prove great numbers all over the place. But if you're not actually seeing the improvement in your new patient numbers and you're not tracking it, then you really don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to making these marketing decisions. So very, very important that people are tracking and held accountable for the tracking.
And it's interesting that you say that, because it's one of those things that sometimes, as you said, maybe this is part of the segue to me, I don't know, But this is one of those things where, as you know, a lot of them, they don't have the good data. And it's tough. For example, let's just say if I had hired you, and if someone working for me were not tracking where these people are coming from. So imagine I'm Dr. Kevin Johnson, which I'm not, but I have my receptionist or somebody, a greeter, scheduling coordinator, tracking this for me. If they're not putting in that it's specifically from this or specifically from that. And the interesting thing is, some of you who are listening to this might even be more of a specialty practice, even a pediatric dentist, as an example. They may get patients that come to them and they're with them until they turn 18 years old or some adolescent age, and then they're going to go on to a general dentist. But sometimes they work as a specialist too. And even just, when you think about the nuances of tracking where the patient came from. So just for grins and giggles for a minute, I'm Dr. Kevin Johnson, the pediatric dentist. Dr. Grace Rizza, the dentist, sent me a patient because it's a unruly 5-year-old that needs some serious work. And I'm going to bring them to my office and sedate them, take care of all the work, and send them back to Dr. Grace Rizza. Where did that patient come from? Did it come from Dr. Grace Rizza, or did it come from, say, a Instagram thing, and mom really is the reason why the kid is here? So there's a difference between the actual referral source and the dentist that they came from. And many of these systems actually have two slots where you can actually fill out the dentist who's seeing the patient and what's the actual source. So even that, just that little nuance, for those of you who work with Grace or someone else, maybe Grace in the long run, you need good data to be able to go back and say, it's not that we just got 25 new patients. We got, X from Instagram and X from this and X from that kind of thing. So.
Absolutely. And it's so funny, Kevin, I can tell when people fake this information. So sometimes we'll get a report back and it'll be like, we got 10 from Yellow Pages. I'm like, no, you didn't. You absolutely did not. Yeah.
I don't even know how Yellow Pages make it in the office or make it in the house anymore. I mean, literally.
Like, yellowpages.com, maybe? Probably not.
Well, and that goes to just from the top down.
Yeah.
We have to make it a thing. We have to make it a priority that this is information we need. And I think oftentimes it's not that anyone's doing a bad job, or it's really just the matter that no one's really made this a priority. No one's really pointed out, I need this information so I can make good judgments. Because in the end, it's funny, because I think as practitioners, we want the office to be busier because we can be more profitable, and then we can afford to do more in different things. As team members, sometimes we might assume they don't want busy offices. But the funny thing is, usually when I ask team members, do you want a day where we have a bunch of holes in the schedule, or do you want a day where it's full but very efficient? And I mean, 99.9% of the time, the team says we want a full day, because when the day is full and it flows well, it's like we come in, we have our morning meeting, lunch, we're out of here. The day just flows like that, as opposed to a day with full of holes.
Yeah.
And it just drags on.
See, I've worked in a dental practice before I started my business in 2009. I was always in marketing. I was a marketing director for a 2-location practice. And we wanted the doctors busy, because then they weren't hovering over us. If they were busy, they were happy, and then we were happy. So I can definitely relate to that. But I have also worked with practices where they don't want to be too busy. And so the gatekeeper is keeping the number at a comfortable number. And you can kind of recognize when this happens, because I can see their marketing numbers and their traffic, and I can see, okay, either you don't have any room in your schedule, you're not scheduling properly to allow for new patients, or someone who's answering the phone really doesn't want to have any more hours. They don't want to be open. They want to be home when their kids get home or something. And that does happen. I'm sorry, doctors. I'm sorry, office managers. I've seen it. It happens.
I can think of 3 right now.
Yeah. It's
So
unfortunate.
but see, I will say, going back to my original goal, when you said you show me your number and I'll show you mine, um, that's why I go to 2 a day, because most folks, it's tough to do. Say we want to do 25, for example. If we do 2 a day, then it's something we can look at every day. If we literally say, whether you block it out in your schedule and say, I want 2 a day, then literally when we have a morning meeting, we have 2 today or we don't. If we go back, because a lot of people, could you imagine having, and think back to your days in a dental office, would you want 12 new patients 2 days a month? It's usually nicer to have them typically spread out throughout the month. They get to see what the office looks like and runs like. They get the real experience for their new patient experience. So I think in some respects, it's good flow
Yeah.
as opposed
Yeah.
to all at one shot.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on your preferences and how you like to work and what kind of procedures you do and all
Definitely.
this, how you schedule. And that's why, you know, people should work with you. They should get that assistance in designing their ideal day, their ideal week, and then working backwards to create that. And it might be different, for one practice than for another practice. Um, I
That's
want
why
to
it's all
touch,
tailored.
yeah, yeah. I want to touch real quick on what's working right now in marketing, because I don't want anyone to finish up this conversation and still not know what they should do, what they should look like, what they should be looking at. So
Sure.
your number one referral source, once you're an established practice, should always be word of mouth. That should always be number one. If it's not, you're doing something wrong, in my opinion, because even if I'm bringing you 20 new patients through marketing or 30, those people should be referring to you. And so word of mouth ultimately should always be your number one source. When it's not, it's a little bit of a red flag, and you need to look internally before you look externally, or as you look externally as well. So word of mouth, number one. Number two, and this depends on your area, your level of competition, how Google sees you. There are some weird circumstances where Google doesn't see you as located inside of your town. And so it's going to be very hard for you to accomplish top rankings in SEO. But in most situations, SEO and being found on Google is your next best source of new patients. After SEO, typically speaking, Google Ads is your next best investment in terms of paid marketing. The new patient acquisition cost is usually somewhere between $150 and $250 for a new patient. And I'm speaking on averages. So if you call me and you're only marketing full mouth reconstructive implant cases, and you want to bring them in at $150, in your market's any level of competition, that might be an unrealistic goal. So remember, all these things are averages, and it's going to be different for every person that I talk to.
And that's kind of gauged on, I'm guessing, area, and area is somewhat predicated on the level of competition and what they're spending, right?
Absolutely. And whoever set up your Google ads too, because
Sure.
you can set up Google ads and not use negative keywords, and your ad can get utilized by people looking for free dentists near me, cheap dentists near me, or Medicaid dentists near me, and may not be bringing in the right type of patient for you. So you need a company like ours, shameless plug, that's fully certified in all levels of Google advertising, that is creating, retargeting display ads, really aggressive audience building, and can also utilize things like negative keywords and territory exclusions so that your budget doesn't get wasted. So all those things matter a great deal. And then, of course, your message matters too. There's some marketing companies out there that just target, implant leads, or just target Invisalign leads. And we run targeted ad campaigns too, but be very careful that they're not just running ads based on price. If you're a high value type practice, you don't want the advertising that's out there reflecting you, building a brand that is of cheap dentistry. So there's a fine line between building your brand and your reputation and having an offer to bring in new patients, and diminishing your brand through free or cheap messaging over and over and over again. So just kind of a word of caution there.
And I think that really, I guess I'll offer my opinion. I'm interested in yours too, but as competent and gifted as many of the clients are that I've worked with, most of them are, like, maybe to a detriment, too humble and modest. So to your point, they might literally be the Morton Steakhouse or the French Laundry or what have you. But when you ask them about their practice, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like Applebee's.
Right.
It's not, and I'm not knocking Applebee's, but there's a pretty big difference between Morton Steakhouse and Applebee's.
Yeah. I love video marketing because it allows us to interview the doctor and
Sure.
ask the right questions. Why did you get into dentistry? What can a new patient expect when they visit your practice? And at that point, it's hard for them to be humble if we ask the right questions. They just have to be genuine and open. And when you do that, then you connect with the people that are right for you. So I love what social media has brought to us and what the digital age has brought to us in terms of video, because it gives you that extra dimension to connect with people in an authentic way, whereas mailers can't do that.
No.
They just can't. So
No. Well, and I think, it's like I think, what is it? If just in talking, 7% of how we communicate is actually what's said. And I think it's 38% is actually how we use your voice. So tone, inflection, timing, pace, all those kinds of things. And then the rest of it's body language. So sometimes people might stop even listening, but they're just kind of fixated on how you look or your facial expressions and things like that, as opposed to even what you're saying. And that might be all that sells it right there.
Kevin, I would love to do a whole video on vocal tone and body language.
Let's do it.
All right. Awesome.
I'm down.
Awesome. All right.
I've actually done some immersion in this. The last time I went to a coach, and I will tell you, and I think I told you at the beginning before we even keyed this up today, that when I first started doing public speaking, I was terrible. Now, mind you, I would dating myself, I would take the VCR tape from the office and I'd take it home and I'd plug it in and I'd start playing it. Most times I couldn't get past the first 5 to 10 minutes of watching myself. And it was because I would get up and I would talk like this. And this is about as exciting as my entire 4-hour presentation went, but over time, and what I was going to get to was the last time I went to see a coach, he and I were in a room for 11 hours straight. It was literally like, if you want to like equate this to something, it was like, it had to have been like Navy SEAL training for coaches or something. Cause he beat me up, grilled me, ran me through the ringer, taught me a lot. And I mean, even with that, I would love to share that in another podcast if you want to.
Absolutely. Because as we're marketing and getting people to call the office, if someone is answering the phone and they're like, thank you for calling Dr. It's just gone. It's gone. And I know that I don't cross over into that space, but I do work with my own team in vocal tone, especially as a woman, because we're kind of trained to have this higher, more kind and gentle voice. And it sometimes diminishes all confidence in whatever you're trying to get across. So I would love to talk about nonverbals and vocal tone in the dental practice and how it affects.
Well, let's do it. Cause because I see it from the other side too, where someone can be spending $2,000-$3,000 a month to drive patients to their front door. And then as you said, the phone could be answered with this, I'm not present kind of thing, where it's like, I'm kind of busy doing something else, but I'll answer the phone right now.
Yep.
And that's my first impression.
Yep.
Or it could be, what they actually see when they get to the office. I mean, as you said, this is an entirely different podcast.
I'm worried we might be building our own little series here, but we'll see. I'm going to try to keep you on the hook for as many episodes as I can.
Hey, let's do it. I'm good for it.
All right. So next one, stay tuned, is going to be on nonverbals in the dental practice and how to master nonverbals in the dental practice. All right. Another question for you. So when I talk to these doctors and they don't know their numbers, and I think sometimes they don't even know how to get their numbers. Mm-hmm. what advice would you give to a practice owner who just has no idea what's going on? And doesn't know their numbers? Where do they?
One of my favorite sayings in life is that all the solutions are super simple until we complicate them with people. Okay. So the reality of it is, if we make this whole thing really, really simple, we just need good numbers. Okay. So that means we got to ask good questions, and we got to know where to put the answers. It's that simple, right? And the interesting thing is, we're worried about, maybe going back to you for a second, spending money on a certain budget or something. But many of these practices have spent anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 on a practice management software. And then you have monthly support fees and all these different things. That is literally like, that should be your brain for the office. I mean, it literally runs our day, makes our days better. And for something that you spent so much money on, we would want to get the absolute most out of it. So think of it this as like, this would be an employee. You wouldn't want to give someone $40,000 and just say, well, we'll use 10% of what you're capable of doing. No one would agree to that, right? But a lot of folks do that with their practice management software. So really, in the end, what we want to do is say, when we answer that phone, we want to be able to say, as I said in the previous example, where did you come from? And ultimately, we may have to ask that second question of, is this a professional referral, or did you actually come from something that we're doing, which really goes to the practitioner, the owner of the practice, or the office manager, communicating to the team, these are our marketing strategies. Like, ask the question, have you guys even shared what you're doing with the team so they even know? So sometimes, go ahead.
I have to interject. I'm so rude. I'm so sorry. We were told this week by a client that he does not want his team to know what he's doing for marketing. It was the weirdest thing. I was like, well, why?
Well, and I think sometimes it's a scarcity mindset. There's a scarcity mindset with a couple things that go on in practices, and it's not just dental practices. It goes on in many different circles. But the scarcity mindset is always going to hold us back, always. So I'd be willing to bet, if anybody wants to drop a comment into wherever you see this posted, be happy to answer it. But I'll throw this out as a challenge. You drop a comment or a question that states why you don't want to share it, and I can pretty much guarantee I can come up with a reason why you should. Okay, and I'll tell you, at this point, I've never had anybody give me a reason that we can't overcome. Okay, and sometimes maybe it's concerned about the dollar spend, and they're going to start adding it up and thinking, well, that should be going to the team. I don't know. But the reality of it is, everybody's got $1,000 phone, and there's an app on every phone that's a calculator. They can do the math. They can figure things out. And most times they come up with presumptions that are most times incorrect and much inflated. So
absolutely,
I think in the end, if you were to literally, go to a team meeting and share with them, here's the strategies. And you don't have to go into great detail about things, but they at least need to know how we can acquire new patients, where we can look for it, because then we got to go into let's just say for grins and giggles, you have Dentrix or you have Open Dental. We have to have those campaigns set up as something that we can run a report on at the end of a week, a month, a year, and say, these are the conduits from which these patients came. And that way, where they came from, your dollars being spent well. And, a lot of this actually really kind of leads to even the question we were talking about before, which is, how many is enough? And even with that, I'm guessing at times you even modify maybe how you're marketing the client, because maybe in the beginning, like I've had clients that I've worked with for, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And it's because we're constantly reinventing the wheel or reinventing the focus of what we're doing. So it could be, say, a practice just wants to fill chairs. And then after a period of time, then they want to start doing light cosmetic makeover work. And then they want to transition into, we want to be like Mr. Smile, or, whatever your shtick is for what you're putting out there, your purpose. if you want to do full mouth rehab, then, that's not, I'm guessing, not going to be the same campaign that you're running just to fill the chairs, right?
Right. Yeah. And we need to know and have these numbers, and there needs to be some accountability around getting the numbers,
Yep.
because we can't even do the treatment plan until we have the numbers. We can't even reverse engineer from nothing.
We'll just
So
guess.
we're guessing. Exactly.
Right.
So what are the numbers that are most important for a dentist to have?
The first two numbers I always ask right out of the gate. Actually, there's two numbers, then there's a very quick second question. But I always ask, how many active patients do you have, and how many are scheduled? Those are always my first two numbers. And then I'll say, in the last month, how many openings did you have? Because it's usually an indication of a very, very quick indication of where we are. So for example, there's practice I worked with in the Southeast, we'll say, and we started going through the numbers, and I said, well, run me a report and tell me what you have. And they had about 5,000 active patients. Well, I know just from, it's a 2-doctor practice, I knew there's no way on God's green earth they're ever going to fit 5,000 patients through their practice. And let's go by it, in an ideal world, we want every patient to come through twice a year. Okay, so that means 10,000 appointments, 10,000 hygiene appointments. Not gonna happen, right? So
Right.
it basically means we have to go in and clean this thing up.
Right.
So that gets to a really good number of how many true patients do we have? So we whittle it down and we get to, we have to inactivate certain people, which, in most circles, if somebody's not been to your office in 18 months to 2 years, you're not their dentist anymore. They may walk around and they may say, Dr. Rizza is my dentist, but the reality of it is, if they're not an ongoing patient, they're not somebody you're going to typically call upon and say, Kevin, we have an opening today. Would you like to come in and get your teeth cleaned? Right? It's like, who is this again? Right? So really the active patient number, the scheduled number, and really looking at the number of openings that you have is like that's the first litmus test I use to kind of get an idea of where do we sit, what kind of opportunity do we have, what real numbers are we working with. And I think if you go to the other end of the spectrum, for a 1-doctor practice, I think the lowest number, I'm throwing this out as a challenge for those of you who are up for a challenge, the lowest number I believe I've ever seen was 113 unscheduled patients for a single dentist. Now, many times I see numbers that are like 500, and numbers like that. And they might be patients that they have that are professionals that, they'll just call when they have an opening because they're flying all the time, or they're traveling, what have you. Or they're just patients that, they're all in on something for a while and then they're not, but they'll be back in 18 months. I get it. But in the ideal world, and this kind of gets to another number that we should have, is that if you shot for, in an ideal world, at least 95% of your patients scheduling before they walk out the door, at least, then, and some teams might say, well, that seems pushy, or that seems like I got to work for that, or what have you. And I think given the choice, would you rather kind of, and if I'm a scheduling coordinator, if I said to Grace, I have an appointment on, I don't even know what 6 months is from today, but let's just say I have an appointment on December 3rd. And I'm sure if we look this up, it's going to be a weekend, but I have an appointment on December 3rd and it's at 10 a.m. Does that work for you? And Grace might say, I have no flipping idea. I don't have my calendar on me. I got to ask my husband about it. Tell you what, why don't we just get that thing scheduled? You figure it out when you get home and call me back.
They have their schedule on them.
I know that.
They do now. Yeah.
You know that.
I know you know that. And here's the thing, I'll just share it from a patient's perspective, because I'm really good at just staying in as a patient. I had a dental appointment yesterday, and my hygienist scheduled my next appointment while she was waiting on the doctor. So why not use that time? Get it done.
And the funny thing is, given the alternative, I've not met many team members that say, oh my God, I totally love calling people off of a call list or off a report, off of Dentrix or Open Dental or whatever it is, EagleSoft. I've never met a team member who loves doing that. But in an ideal world, hygienists can help out with that too. And most of them, they're their patients. They're the ones they spend the most time with. But most times, even they're not super interested in making those phone calls or text messages or what have you. So, given the option, it's always easiest to do it while they're standing right there in front of you.
And then the more time that passes psychologically, the less likely they are to schedule with you. So if they don't schedule with you on the spot, having a protocol to get them scheduled right away is the best way to go about it.
And 10 years ago, they used to talk about 7 days of motivation. And I almost laugh about that anymore because I think our attention span has grown shorter and shorter. It's like by the time they've driven out of the parking lot, motivation's gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So recapping your numbers, we've got active patients, open appointments from the past month.
Well, active patients, unscheduled patients, because that gives us a gap of opportunity.
Okay.
So for example, when we ran those numbers, we found out they have, one I did not long ago, they had 800 unscheduled patients. And most of them had been in a reasonable period of time. So there was a ton of opportunity. And I think this is going to lead into another conversation that you and I need to have about this, because these are all numbers and this all sounds good. But I think based on something you said earlier, we're going somewhere with this.
Mm-hmm.
So active, unscheduled, and we're going to end up inactivating a number of people as a result of doing this cleanup. And that's okay because we have to have good numbers. And then how many openings did we even have in the last month? And we can kind of extrapolate that, because sometimes you're not going to run a report for openings, but you can go back through and start counting up how many hygiene appointments could I fit in here that would have been, depending on your practice, hygiene appointments that could have been 40, 50, 60 minutes. And I could have fit these in here. And, it's crazy enough at certain practices, if you have 4 hygienists, it would not be insane to have, 8, 10, 12 openings in a day.
Yeah. What's scary for me right now, Kevin, is that there's going to be a dentist somewhere who goes back after listening or watching this and has their team run the numbers and then gets so disappointed in their team. And then gets so disappointed in what they're not doing. And didn't we teach you this at some seminar 5 years ago and we're not doing it? Can you talk a little bit, and this is totally off our topic, but can you talk a little bit about the right way to start implementing some of these managerial tasks and the wrong way?
Yes. And that's funny you say that because, and this is totally off topic and I've not even told you this yet. I've got a whole practice management seminar series, and not so much, some of this is not really geared towards the team. This is geared towards being a good CEO, a good manager, a good leader for the practice. So this is something, and it's a lot of what I work on with clients because, working as a coach, consultant, and offsite CEO, I mean, sometimes it's like, I still to this day think back to a long-term client that I had, and it never really dawned on this practice manager. I said, you have to consider yourself being me when I'm not around. So when I leave, you're the coach. Okay. And she didn't really, up to that, it was like, you could see, it's like, bing, the light bulb went off, and at that point, she got it. Okay. So as a practitioner, imagine, maybe if your professor from dental school came back to you and they taught you certain things, you only learn so much in dental school, but maybe there's been new techniques that have been taught at the dental school, but you've never been taught those things, and maybe it's something that you may or may not have appealed to you, but they came to you and said, Grace, what are you doing? Nothing I can see, right? I mean, that's not going to go over well. It's demoralizing. It's not going to be fun. So first, I think, once we identify that there's a gap or an opportunity, I think if we went back and just start out with questions. Questions are really one of the most powerful tools you'll ever have as being a leader or manager, because you'll start to find out, do people really understand what their true job, role, and responsibility is? Like oftentimes I'll go to a practice and I'll ask a scheduling coordinator, if you boiled your job down to one of to 3 bullet points. I'll ask people, what's your job description? And it's like they keep talking for 5 minutes. Okay. We can all boil a scheduling coordinator's job description down to literally 3 bullet points. I'll give you 2 of them. The schedule is full and productive. Now, there's a whole lot that has to go into that bullet point. Okay. The second thing is, our patients love our practice and love you because of what you do with them and for them. Okay. So literally that whole job description can be boiled down to those 2 things. So when we talk about, oh, I've been too busy doing this, or I've been too busy doing that. Well, it still comes back around to, is the schedule full? And do they know? So this kind of gets to like, people understanding their job, their role, their responsibility, and then there being accountability for this. So we don't want to go at them as if they already knew they had that accountability, or they already knew they had that responsibility. We don't want to go at them and basically, berate them or take them out behind the shed, or however you want to put it. We don't want to do those things. We want to first see if they even understood it. And if they don't, just literally think of it like, and I want to come out with the, remember the Staples easy buttons?
Yes.
Okay. I want one, but maybe it says reset. Okay. And think of this as like, this is a reset conversation. I'm not going to worry about history. I don't care about what happened, because I've never met a person who's been able to change history, but everyone has a capacity to change today, tomorrow, and so on. So if we were to go in and say, look, let's hit the reset. Your primary focus here is to make sure that schedule is filled every day. I don't care what has to happen to make that happen, but that is your baby. And if you need to call in the cavalry to help you out, then do that. If you need help in figuring out how to make that happen, let's do that. If you don't understand our software well enough to pull the right data or pull the short call list or any of those kinds of things, we'll figure that out.
Yeah. What I see a lot of right now, just across the board with the generation that's entering the workforce right now, is a high level of discomfort on the telephone, because we're so dependent and so used to texting and messaging on our phones. And sometimes it's going to serve you well, because if you can leverage technology to be texting and to be using those things to get patients in, great. But we also have to be leaders in the sense that we're going to help our team confidently step forward past their own personal comfort zone, so that they're doing the activities that they need to do in order to fulfill that higher level responsibility of keeping the schedule full.
And it's funny you say that, because so many team members have, they have such an awareness and capacity with technology, but it's not applied. And they may know how to navigate Instagram. They may know how to navigate this. So in reality, I don't buy, and I use this word, I don't mean it to be offensive when I say it, but I don't buy all the excuses about I don't know how or I can't. And I think some of it is like when I see people figure out how to navigate or social media stalk a person or a corporation or something, like they'll literally go into every little thread of social media to figure something out about an individual or something. I can tell you something now, you can figure out how to use Open Dental. We can figure out how to use, whichever program it is. There's no excuse in that department. It's just
Right.
we haven't applied ourselves yet.
Right.
And I think, and getting back to your one point, there's a lot of today's workforce that they didn't have parenting like some may have had growing up. I came from a divorced family, and my mother worked nights. My brother and I had to figure it out. It's just everything in life. We were cooking, cleaning, ironing, doing laundry, the whole 9 yards before we ever even thought about driving. Okay.
Yeah.
We had to figure those things out. And in today's world, I think a lot of folks have not had to go through all the same kinds of things that we did, which put us in a position to learn. So bringing this back around, there's an element of that that's needed to kind of coach and guide, and almost, I'm not going to call it parenting, but it's kind of dangerously close to what we might consider to be parenting, to guide some of the newer workforce so they know and understand what good looks like. So they know and understand what is necessary to make something work and how they can plug into something. And back to your point, the connectivity of the team. And because again, I've probably shown that stupid thing 3 times on this podcast today.
Showing
And
the phone.
but it's our life, and as connected as it has made us, it has made us that less connected.
Mm-hmm.
In my way.
Absolutely. So for our audience, let's kind of recap some of our conversation today. I'll kind of start with the marketing. Track your new patient sources every single day. There should be no gaps, and look at those numbers at least on a monthly basis to make sure that the team is keeping track and asking. Evaluate your marketing at least a couple times a year. Look at how everything is working. If something is no longer working, you need to either change the message or change the strategy. And then make sure you're utilizing the strategies that are working best today so that you're not wasting money. And that's largely having the right message, knowing your brand, and then leveraging, see what I did there? Leveraging digital marketing to grow your dental practice. So that's my recap.
Well, and I will use part of your recap as a segue into mine. Is with anything that you should do, it should have purpose. So if you are going to leverage yourself and maybe tap into somebody like Grace to help promote your practice and what's already good about your practice. So we're not talking about reinventing the wheel. We're talking about taking what's already good and amplifying it, right? But it should also have purpose. So it's not just that we become noise on social media or the internet or what have you. So I guess I should recap a few of my things too, right?
Yes.
So really it's about knowing your numbers. And really, if I take everything and encapsulate what I was talking about, think of yourself as being the CEO of you. Because a lot of you that are listening to this, you might be the dentist, the owner. And I did this exercise in a talk yesterday. Is I had everyone write their name, and then I had them write international after their name and a comma with an INC. And I said, and a lot of them started laughing. And I said, you're laughing because you think too small. You think, that's just it. You just think too small. And instead of playing big and getting big results, you get smaller results. So, maybe I challenge some of you to think bigger in the sense of working more through your team, thinking like a CEO, leverage yourself through Grace, leverage yourself by working better through your team. And with that, knowing your numbers, so the active patient number, the scheduled number, the capacity that we have that we can fill. One thing that I'll kind of add into what we can work with on this is with a purpose is maybe talking to either your team or Grace, either one, maybe both, about what it is that we're really trying to promote. Okay, so if it's just like teeth in a day, maybe it's veneers, maybe it's, it's a funny thing is there's so many disposable income purchases that are being bought in even since COVID started. I don't hear a lot of people talking about veneers or these cosmetic makeovers. They're out there and I see them happening all the time. There's a surgeon I work with right now that's actually in your backyard, Grace. He's doing close to 2 implant supported dentures per week. Those are big treatment plans. So when we think about, this patient might not want to do this, or they, we get into the emergency based type stuff. So, and then the other was just when you know what needs to happen, then we need to figure out how we make that happen with our team. That's really the biggest thing I think to take from this is whether it's we get the answers of the technical side of how we make that happen, or when we get that figured out, we need to figure out how through leadership and management, we implement those things through and with our team.
Absolutely. So I have 2 topics for us for future videos. We did talk about, and you committed to the nonverbals video, which we're going to.
I'm down with it. Let's do it.
I think it's going to be an awesome topic that I haven't seen really talked on a lot in dentistry. And then I want to, if you're down, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think about doing a scarcity and abundance video where we talk about what it actually means? Because it's sometimes used in the dental profession in a way that it is not really appropriate to the true meaning of those words.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and it's funny. maybe I'll use another word that I have to sometimes explain too, that also gets misused, which is ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I say that because it might be the ignorance of the true meaning of abundance and scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
And so to define, ignorance is usually the lack of knowledge about a particular topic, okay, not the derogatory sense of that use.
Right.
So yes, I'm all for that one. And I have this strange suspicion that maybe when we do the next one, we'll find 2 more topics.
I am going to try that. I'm going to try to keep this going as much as I can. That's my goal here. Well, thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah. And so for anyone,
I'm like, I didn't realize it's been this long.
Yes. So for anyone listening, again, I'm Grace Rizza, Identity Dental Marketing, and I'm here today with Kevin Johnson of Leverage Consulting. And you can look us up. You can find us online. If you have questions for us, we're more than happy to set up a call with you and help you in any way that we can. So,
absolutely.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.